Pyramiden is a small coal mining outpost which is in Svalbard on the island of Spitsbergen. Originally designed and built in the 1970s, Pyramiden has been since abandoned for decades, giving the environment an eerie and tattered look. Due to the freezing climate in Pyramiden, all the buildings and their contents have been preserved but are clearly dated in their style. In our game, you will receive your inheritance from your grandfather, who dies mysteriously in Pyramiden itself. Intrigued by the key to his apartment and the other items that he left you, you decide to head out to Pyramiden yourself and unintentionally stumble upon a more complex truth involving your grandfather and his profession. You will follow clues and solve puzzles which will be immersed in our three environments: the boat, your grandfather's apartment, and the mineral refinery. Our aim with the game is to give an original, beautiful visual and the freedom to explore the environments, but also to combine with an interesting gameplay by showing off our puzzles.
First and foremost, we knew we wanted to go with a realistic art style with high quality textures. Once we decided our direction, we wanted to look at the three major influences. We had the 1970s art style with bright, punchy colours and curves, and lots of different patterns. We had the Soviet style of blocky, organised colours with kind of like straight objects. And then there was the abandoned settlement of Pyramiden itself. We also looked at games with similar art styles to ours, so we had a look at games like Colat. This gave a good understanding of how this art style could look in game. This resulted in a bright art style that has been greatly desaturated over time, with lots of patterns decorating the walls. Of course, this art style would have varied from building to building, giving our game a diverse look without breaking away from the eerie feel of this cold, desolate style. From that, we created some example textures in Substance Designer to give a good feel of how this level will look. We intend to use Substance with a lot of our textures as it can give a good, realistic art style.
Our game takes place in a real-life area, Pyramiden. The site was abandoned and all the workers died in a plane crash, but are these two events entirely unrelated? This conspiracy has been expanded upon to form our narrative. We imagine that Pyramiden was not just a coal mining settlement. Instead, during the Cold War, the Soviets discovered uranium and began refining it in order to boost their arms race research. An Allied intelligence spy, your grandfather, was sent in. However, the Soviets realized there was a spy in their midst and staged an accident, killing all their workers and abandoning the settlement in one fell swoop. On your 21st birthday, you receive your inheritance of a key to your grandfather's apartment and a letter. Growing curious, you decide to travel to Pyramiden in order to investigate. By solving puzzles and finding clues, you seek to discover the events that led up to your grandfather's demise.
We decided to make three environments for our game. The first environment the player will visit is the boat that they use to go to Pyramiden. This is the smallest of the environments, and it is used as a tutorial to teach the player the basic mechanics of examining items. When they're done there, they will move to the apartment, which is a much bigger environment and is also the main environment. They will have to explore the room and use their own initiative to solve puzzles. This is also the first room where the art style of the game will become most evident. The wallpaper is torn and desaturated. All of the objects would have a layer of dust on top of them, as well as the floor, just to show that the room has been abandoned for many years before being visited by the player.
For the factory, we wanted to be more ambitious on our final environment so the game would end on a high note. We wanted to have large environments the player could explore, but we wanted it to be achievable within our production time limit. We believe we have found this balance in creating a large space with enough to do inside to keep it interesting. We worked on optimizing it as best as possible by planning to create 3 different vats that we will evenly distribute across the ground floor, creating enough variation but cutting production time needed down immensely.
The first shader we created was to work out how tint and desaturation worked within Pyramiden's washed out blue theme. Once I completed this, I moved on to basic colour shifts of the shader, where we need to heighten or desaturate certain colour values within the environment, but combine textures over the top like grunge and distortion. From there I then worked out how to include tint to windows and blur effects by enlarging pixels, allowing objects behind windows to have a much lower level of detail without it ruining the scene. I also worked on animated fragment shaders, allowing a place texture to move within the geometry, which will allow us to create puddles or small streams or other liquid assets. For the final piece, I created shaders that distorted based on a black and white noise map as the input, creating static effects that allow us to use for machinery display and other simpler effects. Finally, a work in progress reflection shader that will reflect the environment around it using reflection probes. Some additional shaders that we created was a translucency shader that will create the illusion of internal refraction, and an outlining shader that will allow us to highlight objects that the player can pick up. Last of all comes the lighting. At the moment we're using a Unity plugin as a placeholder for the lighting to create it. The aim will be, once the main shaders are completed, we can move on to creating our own volumetric lighting. The lighting will aim to replicate a mixture of alien isolations for darker environments, but move more towards The Last of Us for the lighter environments.
Game mechanics are one of the most important aspects of a game, as it is the method in which the player interacts with the game world around them. When designing the mechanics, we wanted them to not only work fluidly and seamlessly, but also be flexible and easy to set up and customize for any scenario we apply them in. A key mechanic is our pickup mechanic. This allows players to pick up any important objects in the game world and examine them in 360 degrees to look for any hidden details. When a clue is found, a photo of it is added to the journal to refer to later. The pickup script is very flexible. Each clue has its own unique value that controls how far from the camera the clue is held. This allows us to hold smaller objects closer to the camera and hold larger objects further to keep the size of the objects you are examining consistent on the screen. Another key mechanic is the ability to pick up objects and use them to interact with other objects. An obvious example is a key opening a door, but the system can be applied to any two objects in the level. Again, the system is very flexible and straightforward, consisting of objects A and B. Upon picking up A, B is unlocked. A third mechanic we are introducing is the Geiger counter. Because of the large amounts of uranium in the area, the refinery level in particular, we will use radiation as a way of stopping the player from accessing parts of a level we don't want them to go. Having a Geiger counter will also allow us to create puzzles involving radiation. For example, finding a safe path through a highly radioactive room. If a player absorbs too much radiation, the player will die.